What I wanted to do today was talk a bit about reading the records and reading them like a pro. Um, but I also just wanted to do a quick little update about things that are going on in the GenealCymru universe before I get into it. So new logo since I've been live last. There's a new logo, a lovely daffodil on a tree branch, representing obviously the branches of your family tree that are Welsh, because the daffodil is the national flower of Wales. Drew it myself and refined it with the help of a really good friend. So I'm really pleased with how that came out. On the website, on my website, genealcymru.com, there is a new blog project. I haven't really talked about it on YouTube because of the theme, and because the theme that it covers is censored on YouTube, so I can't really easily talk about it. But the theme of the blog project on my website is it's called commemorating. What is it called? Oh, it's called Ancestors Lost by, we'll say, Unaliving Themselves, a commemoration project. And so it's aimed at retelling the stories of all of my ancestors throughout the many centuries that I've researched who unalived themselves. And who really, when you find ancestors whose lives ended in this way, the last kind of public writings about them are not great, because the newspapers, especially in the Victorian period, were very interested in telling like scandalous stories, and so they misrepresent a lot of the stories of these people and talk about a lot of the specifics of how they passed away, which, when you look at what activists and advocates now know and teach, that's really not a great way to talk about stuff like this in public forums, because it's just not safe. So I went through the safe messaging guidelines and did a bunch of research, and the goal is then to tell their stories in a different, more compassionate, more understanding kind of way. Hi, Sky King, and oh, hi, Davina. Hello to both of you. I hope you're both doing really well. And so that's one component of the blog project on my website. And then the other component is then sharing those resources. So sharing resources with each biography that I've written about each one of these ancestors, that is aimed at giving people an opportunity to have a new way to access resources for the prevention of unaliving oneself, to say it in the YouTube censored way. So I'm really excited about that, and there's new biographies coming out once a month until next year for that. There's going to be some other things. I'm working on an event with someone right now, so it's very exciting. New YouTube video coming at some point soon. I'm working on a video about whether you need to know Welsh to research your Welsh ancestors, because there is some misinformation out there about that, and also I think Welsh is a really great example for when people, or it's a good example to look at, to kind of teach people about how to approach doing genealogy in or dealing with records that are in a language that they're not familiar with. And I think Welsh is a really great one to do that with because there's so much misinformation about the Welsh language. And when English speakers encounter Welsh, especially for the first time, it's really intimidating for them. And some people will like react dismissively or even derisively towards the language just because of like prejudice that we pick up through consuming media. And it's out there a lot. So that's what that's going to be. But I also made a booklet of Welsh vocabulary that can help you research your ancestors. So that's going to be coming out on my website at the same time as the next video comes out. So also very excited about that. But with that all said, that's kind of everything that's going on in the GenealCymru universe. So I guess we'll just dive into all about reading the records like a pro. So like I said, the premise of this live stream is to talk about how I don't think people are actually reading the records when they're doing their family history research. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, unfortunately, and especially people who are just starting out in genealogy. So hopefully this is going to be like a good way to see how you can do it differently. And I don't mean that people aren't reading. I don't mean that judgmentally. It's just something that I've noticed when talking to people about how their research is going, and especially when it comes to talking to people about their brick walls. But I do think that it's also something that we all need to work on to become better researchers. But I think that there's a couple different reasons for why people aren't reading the records as closely as they could be. So the first reason is I think that people develop bad habits because of how some genealogy websites work. The second thing is I think people don't actually know how to read the records, which is fine. And the third thing is that I think that there are some people who are misusing AI to do the reading work for them that they should actually be doing themselves. So we're gonna hate on AI a bit at the end here. But the reason that I think reading the records is so important, and reading the original copies of the records or scans of the originals, the reason that I think that it's so important is that if you're not reading the records or reading them effectively, then you're going to end up creating brick walls for yourself. And you're going to end up making a mistake and researching people who aren't related to you at all. And that always sucks when that happens. And I see this most often where people are creating brick walls for themselves, but it sucks either way. And it's just so unfortunate because those brick walls and those mistakes are oftentimes really unnecessary. But we're going to start with those bad habits, and we're going to switch to looking at Ancestry a bit in a minute. But yeah, the bad habits. I see them most often when it comes to how people use Ancestry. And so I'm going to switch over to Ancestry. Perfect, seamless. So Ancestry is where I do most of my research. It is an invaluable tool, and I love that I'm able to sit home and actually access the research for all of my ancestors. And for a lot of people, they use Ancestry to host their family tree because they also have a really great family tree hosting section of their website. And it allows you to actually connect the records that you find to your ancestor's profile. So while it is a really great thing, the Ancestry family trees. I don't actually use Ancestry for my family tree. I keep all of my family tree stuff offline. And we can look at that afterwards if you're at all interested. Just let me know if you're interested in how I make my family trees, because it is kind of unique, I think. And I think for some people it would probably be really helpful for them, because I find that I have um, a really hard time staying focused and maybe not getting lost when it comes to ancestry trees, because I need everything on the screen all at once is kind of how I like it. And because I generally do my research, I don't focus as much on individual peoples as much as I do, like, if I get a full like list of siblings, I'll be working on all of those siblings and their children all at the same time. So I just like to have them all on the screen at the same time. And the offline software really helps me do that. Um, but an ancestry tree can be really helpful for tracking where your information has come from. But I think it does come with some dangers that you really need to be aware of. So we're going to look at this example of Stephen Davis and Rachel Williams's tree. So what we're looking at here is like the index, I guess, for a marriage record from 1818. And I just want to go through the process that I've seen a couple times for how people get from this search result to their family tree. So let's start by looking at the details that Ancestry tells us about this record. So we've got Stephen Davis marrying Rachel Williams. The record type is bands, gender male for Stephen Davis. The date for the bands is 1818. The marriage band's place is Celllan in the county of Cardiganshire in Wales. The marriage date, 2nd of December, 1818. The residence place for Stephen is Llanfair Clydogau, which is the next parish over. And then his spouse is Rachel Williams, and then you've got page number 12. Oops. So, as you can see, I know that some people will read through this extracted information and go, yeah, that's the right people. And then they'll save the record to their tree using Ancestry's really handy feature, which is the save button down below. So let's show off how that works. So you just click save, and then save to someone in your tree. I have a live stream tree that I made with Stephen Davis. And then we can attach, and then it will come up with this, which is where we tell Ancestry what information we want extracted from the record and then put into Stephen Davis's profile, and also Rachel Williams's profile. And then we can just click save to tree and done. And so that information will go into Stephen Davis's and Rachel Williams's profile. And then you'll have also the original record copy also linked in their profile. But we're not going to do that because I don't like that. But we're not going to do that. And the reason that we're not going to do that is because while we have all of this information that Ancestry will extract for us from the record and put it into our family tree, there's also a lot of information that these indexes don't actually pick up on. And so I want you to get the most out of these records as you can, because there is a lot more in there. And I specifically chose a record that is, it's a little bit special in how much information it has. But like a lot of these records are like this. There's things that the index just doesn't pick up on that you also really need to know to be able to continue doing your research. And the only way to get that information is by looking at and reading the original record. So that's what we're going to do now. So let me just bring up the original record. It is the first one here. Okay. When I look at the records, I try to, oh yes, so someone says, what day? Exactly. So we've got the day, yes. And here's something interesting. So if we specifically about the day, we have marriage date here, 2nd of December, 1818. That's what the index tells us. If we actually look at the date on the record, it doesn't actually say the 2nd day of December. It says 2 December. And we look at the next record, and it is the 23rd of December. We look at the previous record, and it says the 20th of November. So it could be the 2nd of December. But we don't really know, because the person who wrote it was confused. So it might have been the 2nd. It might have also been the 20th or the 21st, if the next one here is the 23rd. But we just don't know, which is the case sometimes. We just don't know. So yeah, that's a really great example. And so when I look at all of these records, I try to see them for more than what they're supposed to be. And what I mean by that is that a marriage record can give us more than the name of the couple, more than the date and the place where the marriage happened. And so I always try to pull out as much information as I can from them. So when it comes to this marriage record, here's all the kinds of detail in it that doesn't get picked up by the Ancestry index. So of course, what does get picked up by the Ancestry index is Cellan in the county of Cardigan. We had Stephen Davis, and it did say that he was from Llanfair Clydogau. Rachel Williams, who, if we had clicked on Rachel Williams's name in the index, it would have probably told us that she was from Cellan because she is from this parish. But things that don't get picked up. Stephen Davis is a bachelor. That's important to note because sometimes he will be a widower. Rachel Williams is a spinster. Again, sometimes will be a widower. Sometimes you will get, instead of bachelor, you'll get their actual occupation. Here's William Davis, widower, here on the next record. We don't have any occupations on this, but sometimes you get an occupation. Sometimes, even better than the name of the parish, we get the name of the farm that they live at. We have married in the church by bands. The index did tell us that they married by bands, which is great. But then, amazingly, on this record, they married by bands with the consent of John Williams, the said father. Like, amazing. Like, you don't get that on marriage records this early. Normally, you only get the father's name on the post-1837 marriage records. But then in this case, the rector, J.H. Lloyd, for this parish, for every single one, he listed who gave consent for the marriage. So Isaac Lewis in this one, John Jones in this one. Actually, John Jones is one of his wife was one of my ancestors. So like, that's amazing. Doesn't get picked up in the index. The name of the person who officiated the marriage, we get that information. That information is sometimes important, as I'm going to talk about a little bit later. We have their signatures. So this is Stephen Davis's original signature, Rachel Williams's original mark. And then we have the witnesses, which is also can be really important. So David Thomas of Bontvine and John Walters of Llanfair. Because oftentimes, well, almost always, these are going to be people who know one or both of the couple. So sometimes you can research these people who show up as witnesses and then actually make some breakthroughs. And I just wanted to do that because I wanted to show how much more information we can get out of the record when we actually read it. And when I'm doing my research, I do that for every time I find a marriage record. I go through that process of recording all of this information, except for the name of the clergyman. I don't normally record that, but I might at some point if I find it starts being more important, or if I have a use for that information. But everything else, from copies of the signatures to the witnesses to their signatures to the place and date to where they live, all of that information gets put into my tree. And that's because when we practice reading the records, we get to know what kinds of information is actually important, and it's all of that stuff as well. And it is really a lot more than I think most people realize. And I think a lot of people miss all this detail, and it stops them from doing further research, which is really unfortunate. But what do you think, chat? Do you have any questions or comments so far? What do you guys look for when you are going through these records? Is there anything that you look for in a marriage record that I don't? Or maybe vice versa. Sorry if that's lots of questions, but like one thing that I'm really fascinated in is how other people research and how other people fill out their family trees, because doing family history research is often such a lonely activity, and you don't really get to get a good sense of how other people do it. But I love finding out how other people do it. But if you're typing, keep going. We can get back to it. Oh, we have Tez Hug. Hello. I'm working on the history of a parish, so I transpose every piece of information from birth, marriage, and death, and census records into Excel, cleric included. Fork Excel into Obsidian. That's awesome. And if you're getting the cleric as well, then you're much more thorough than I am, which is awesome. But that's cool. I haven't tried Excel for doing family history before, but I think there are like lots of like tutorials and stuff out there on how to do that. But that's really cool. Tiny parish in North Wales. That's awesome. I love the tiny rural parishes because that's so much of what my research is, and they're just so fascinating. Like those places where there's only ever like maybe 100 people at the same time. It's just it's so much easier to just get like a holistic view of what the culture and society was like at that time. And everyone ends up knowing each other, but still they do have like their like different community divisions, which you can sometimes pick up on from the records, and I think that's always really cool. But yeah, this is the process that I do for all of the records that I look at. It says population 120, manageable. That's a great population to work on. That's really cool. But yeah, like every marriage record that I find gets read and assessed in the same way. And if there's an original available for it, then I'm going to look at it, because the index is never enough. It just isn't. An index is enough only when it's all we've got. But if you can get more, then get more. But the reason for that is because the indexers, if they're people, they don't have enough time to fully index all of the information. And on top of that, I think they're normally given like a template to use that tells them what information actually needs to be indexed. And there's kind of like no wiggle room for that. So if in the case of Stephen and Rachel, you get all of this extra information, there's just nowhere to put it in the index as they're building it. And oftentimes, based on my experience doing Welsh research, whatever information that template contains is not actually informed by the needs of family historians or the requirements of the place that the records are from. The most important example of this for me in my research is that more often than not, farm names aren't searchable. And so much of the work that I do is just looking for families through looking for their farm, for the name of their farm. Because so many of my ancestors, well, all of my ancestors just had all of the most common names. Excuse me, I was just drinking some water. And because they have common names, like it's just so difficult to look for them as people. So you look for them as people who lived in specific places. And so you look for those farm names. And yeah, so that's literally one of the most important pieces of information for me when I'm researching my Welsh ancestors. And wherever those farm names are indexed, they're often so poorly transcribed that it's not even helpful anyway. And I think that has a lot to do with not having people do the index who are actually familiar with the Welsh language. So it just ends up like a garbled mess. The same issues come up even when it's like a computer program doing the indexing. So yeah, that's just another reason why you need to practice actually reading the records yourself. So the last thing is this. I have a bit of a script here, but I can't remember if I removed that. Anyway, we'll just go through the script as it is. That's fine. But the last thing that I wanted to do is hate on generative AI. If you don't know, am super anti-AI. Under all of my videos now, I write that this video was created by me with my own two hands, without the involvement of AI. But it really worries me how readily people are how readily they're incorporating AI into their research process. Like I've seen people online be like, oh, just stick the record into AI and it'll spit out a summary for you. Stick in a record and it'll analyze it for you. And I've even seen people asking AI bots who their ancestors are, which is just wild to me. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. And I actually, I did try out an AI with this record, and like the summary that it gave me it would have taken me longer to read through that summary than it does actually reading through the record. So like, I just don't see a purpose to it. But the other thing is that I don't think that I know that generative AI just can't do all the stuff that people think it can, because what AI does is it guesses at what the most statistically correct answer is. It's like an averaged out basic source of information, whereas family history research is highly specific, both geographically and culturally, and you need to know about, like, you have to have a knowledge about like the geography and the culture to really get into those idiosyncrasies of how your ancestors lived their lives and how the records actually show that happening. Plus, I don't think that your research process should involve guessing at all. There should always be a method or a reason behind what you're doing. And those methods should always be evolving as you learn more about the people that you're researching. And ultimately, those methods or reasons for why you're doing what you're doing are the things that give the facts in the records meaning. So, what do I mean by that? Well, we'll look at it through our marriage record example. We can look at this record and ask, what are the important pieces of information? Because, like, not everything is super important here. And we can also, like, disagree on what we think is important, which is the other really interesting thing about this kind of research, because it's interpretive. Like, we're interpreting the lines on the paper and trying to build meaning out of them. Tez says, it's not there yet. Human interpretation still very necessary. Great help with wills, though, which can be very difficult to read, but still needs human intervention. Yeah, I've seen like horror stories of like people putting in records into AI and the AI just like makes it up. Because like I don't have a great sense of like, or understanding of exactly how AI works, but like the AI, it can't read words. Like it's reading like or it's not reading because it's not a person. It can't read. It's like making meaning out of the. They do hallucinate. I love that word because it's so, sorry, the AIs do hallucinate, Tez says. And I love that like metaphor because it's so like it's so compassionate to the AI, because that AI, it's just making stuff up because that's what it does. It's just wrong and it's like making errors unnecessarily. Um Wales. Oh, Wales. Hello, Wales. Shemai Pawb. Hello, people. Cariad fawr o Gymru Day. I can read all of that except for the last word. Well, oh yes, South. Yes, I know that word. Much love from South Wales. Hello, welcome. We're hating on AI a little bit at the moment. But yeah, so like, yeah, I do worry about how quickly people have picked up AI to do work that they could be doing themselves, and could be doing themselves way better than the AI is able to do it. But the thing about like knowing what method that you're using, like actually looking at and interpreting the records, is like you get to decide what the important information is. And so like and that will change over time. So like when I started researching at first, like I would have looked at this marriage record and I would have recorded the bride and groom's names, the date, and the witnesses. And I think that that's really good for a beginner. But since then, and since I've been researching more and more, I've been like returning to old marriage records and being like, oh, I really need to know the place information for this. So now, like this is like a couple of years at this point now, since I've like transformed how I've looked at some of these records, but like recording the place, recording those farm names as like residence information. I do all of that now. And also like what their occupations were at the time where they both lived. Plus now I keep a record of all of the signatures because they can be really important. Like the signature for one of the witnesses that you're looking at now, John Walters. I know that signature because that is the signature of my 5 times great-grandmother's brother. And he was super consistent in how he wrote his name. And he's just like all over the the marriage registers, and yeah, mostly marriage registers, um, and maybe a few wills. Like I can just like flip through and find all kinds of examples of his signature, and they're the exact same every time. And then I can go, oh, why did my ancestor know all of these people? Who are they to him? So it just like leads off to so many more really important finds. One of the more recent things that I learned about these records, though, is the importance of the part where it says whether the marriage was done by banns or by license. Because both of these things, either ban or license, those lead to new records. Because many places have books of banns, which you've probably seen if you're on Ancestry or Find My Past or wherever. But also the licenses are all online as well, up to I think the early 1900s. It's just that they're really hard to find because they're not indexed, but they're on Family Search, and I can't actually show you them now because of like use rights stuff with Family Search records. But sometimes these marriage licenses have a lot of really important information in them, especially when it comes to marriages that happened before 1837, because on those marriages, you don't always get information about where exactly, where like the exact name of the farm, but sometimes you get farm names on these old marriage licenses, which can be really great. You can also do other things with them, which is interesting. Like look at who the marriage bondsman is, and go, how did they know that person, or did they know that person? It's also great for early marriage registers where the parish register hasn't survived, but those marriage licenses have survived. So it can kind of fill in some of the, at least for the more wealthy people in the community who were the ones who were getting marriage licenses, can kind of fill in that information for you. But yeah, that's never something that I paid attention to a long time ago when I first started, like looking at whether it was by bands or by license. I never used to pay attention to that. But as I gained more expertise around how to do good research and what records were actually available, that's when that information started becoming important for me. And that's because my method had changed. Wales says in the chat, what do you think will have a greater impact on genealogy? AI messing up, or humans of different languages recording our names and spelling them wrong upon migration? Related people who don't realize it, like those who were at Price being related to people who go by Price today. I mean, AI is going to have a big impact on genealogy just because of how some people have really embraced it, which I'm very against. But yeah, I think that we can look at AI in the similar terms as what you're talking about with those old name changes, as like the significance of historical context to how we're able to look at certain records and how we're able to interpret certain records. Like you need to be understanding records in the context, in the historical and cultural context in which they were written. So like if you know enough about Wales in the, let's say, early 1800s, you can look at a marriage record, or you can look at a set of records for people with completely different names, and then also realize that they're the same person. So where they show up as, let me pull out an example. My 5 times great grandfather on the 1841 census was Evan David. On his 1846 death certificate, he was Evan Davis. On a couple of his children's um, on a couple of his children's marriage records as witness, he was also Evan David, but on one of them, he was Evan David, which I think he like combined words accidentally or something and just like didn't go back and fix it. And then like his son Jacob Davis, my 4 times great grandfather, on all of the records he's Jacob Davis, except for his tombstone where he's Jacob Davies. And so like all of these different names for the exact same person, but like it's understandable if you know enough about Wales at that time, where people were transitioning from patronymic naming system to the hereditary surname system. So going from Ap Davydd to Davis and things like that. And I think we just kind of have to understand AI in similar ways. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit. Hello, Golden Astro Cat Boreda. Wales says King James I, King James VI, King James Bible for Scottish reference. Yeah. So I think that we need to kind of understand AI in similar terms as that. But another place that I see people using AI a lot is with writing summaries of the records, as I mentioned earlier. The information that you include in a summary, because like I do go through for my like direct line ancestors, I go through and create a document where I write research notes in the same way that Connie Knox from Genealogy TV, in the same way that she does research notes. I do mine really similar because I learned from her or learned from her videos. But like I go through for my direct line ancestors and summarize each article or each record that I find about them. But the information that I include in each summary is based on my research process and how I am evaluating the importance of the information in those records. So like one nice example of that is when I'm writing summaries for the records on my 7 times great grandfather, who is David Thomas. One thing that stood out specifically in the old vestry records, because the vestry book for that time period has survived, is that he almost always sat next to, or he always wrote his signature right next to a guy named John Davis. And when John Davis and David Thomas were at the vestry meeting together, I think every time that they were together, except for 2, they wrote their signature together. And I kind of imagine it that they're having their meeting and at the end, they're either like in a line to sign their names on the book, or they're passing the book around. So I kind of feel like it makes me think that John Davis and David Thomas were next to each other a lot, either seated next to each other or standing next to each other. And I only realized that this was actually an important thing to focus on when I learned that John Davis was actually one of my David Thomas's best friends. And I learned that when I found John Davis's will, because he names my ancestor as his good friend and neighbor. And so like now I look at these records and I'm like, oh, it's just 2 buddies sitting next to each other at every meeting. Like that's such a really interesting like little bit of information just to like kind of humanize those people. Right? Yeah, Wales says that is just amazing how the importance of details can reveal so much. Exactly. And like that's something that AI can't do for you because AI can't take all of that like background knowledge that we can have and then use it to interpret the things that we're looking at and try to like pull those little bits of story out of them. The other thing that I pay attention specifically when I'm looking at David Thomas is how he wrote his name. Because he had a very distinctive signature, like John Walters here on this record. Um, but like sometimes he'll write his name as David Thomas from Lampeter, which in the time that he wrote his name like that, he misspelled Lampeter, which was interesting. Other times he's David Thomas of Olwyn, which was the name of his farm, or sometimes he's just David Thomas, but his signature is distinct enough that I can pick out the one that is him, even when there are tons of other David Thomases at that place at that time. But like that's something that I record because like I can, just based on his signature, I can create a little bit of a timeline of where he actually lived. Like I can put a definitive date on when I knew that he was living at Olwyn Farm and when I knew that he was in Lampeter. And that's so important because he's one of my brick walls. So I need to know like as many details as I can about him, right? Wales says, I guess the extra danger is that AI works to please you, whereas genealogists work to find out your heritage for you, the good and the bad, where AI lawyers have been found to make up accounts, reference the legal eagle. Yeah, yeah, AI, from what I've heard, what I've read is that like you can tell AI actually that's wrong and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, it is." But you can like convince them of things that just aren't true. Hi Clute Goodwin. How are you? How are you? Good to see you. The next record that I wanted to look at is another marriage record. Kind of getting back to that idea of how these marriage records, like based on what you know, like different bits of information become important for you. So this is an example of where marriage bans was really important. Oh no, this is just the marriage records for now. So here's Isaac Davis. He is the brother of my 4 times great grandfather. So this is his 1828 marriage record. He was the son of my 5 times great grandparents, and on the marriage record it says that he was from Llandybia, which is his parish. On these pre-1837 marriage records, that's usually the most that you get in terms of where they're from. But then, if you actually look at the marriage banns, because it says here he married by banns, you get some more information. Where is he? He is right here. So you get Isaac Davis and his wife, Susanna Price. And the clerk actually wrote the names of their properties that they lived at, the houses that they lived at. So Isaac Davis was at Tygwynbach, and Susanna Rees was at Krieg. And this is actually brick wall busting kind of information. And it's the one thing that actually made it possible for me to connect this Isaac Davis to my family tree, which is great because I did, before I started researching or when I first got started, according to my Grampy's research, Isaac Davis's son was a confirmed member of our family. But this record made it possible for me to actually make that connection myself, which is really great. And we knew that his son was part of our family because he's one of the famous ones. He was Dan Isaac Davis. He was in the 1880s. He was the sub-inspector of Her Majesty's Her Majesty's sub-inspector of schools or something like that, or education or something. And he was like a really big defender of the Welsh language. And kind of like when you see messages from the Welsh government today about having however many million Welsh speakers by whatever date, they're actually quoting him, because he wrote a collection of like letters and essays called 3 million, it was in English, it is 3 million bilingual Welsh speakers by 1900 or something like that, which was like his goal. But unfortunately, he passed away really young and never got to realize that. And then things went downhill for the Welsh language after that point. But of course, there are many, many people who speak Welsh today still, and it is thriving. But yeah, so about this record, this is the thing about summarizing and analyzing the records yourself. It's that these summaries aren't just a regurgitation of facts. These summaries are rather tools for you to use so that you can continue your research and not get stuck. And that's why you need to be the one writing them, because you need to be able to make that call as to what is important information based on your knowledge of the records, the culture, and the time period. And you should also be able to rank the importance of different pieces of information in these records that come out of them. So like ranking them in terms of, okay, I know that this piece of information here, the place name, is going to make it possible for me to, so to use Isaac Davis as an example, so 1828, I can then look at T. Gwyn Bach. I know I can look for it in 1841, see who lives there then. I can look for it in the tithe record, the tithe maps, and look for it, which are normally like 1838 to like 1844. I know that I can then also look at the other parish records to see who else lives at T. Gwyn Bach, who else was married there, who else was buried from there, who was baptized there. So like each one of these pieces of information just kind of like leads you to this like burst of other records. If you know to actually read the records yourself. But like even these even looking at this like hierarchy of importance, like with, for me, the place name, the farm name being like of number one importance, even above like the names of the people, because like with Isaac Davis and Susanna Reese, at that time in that place, there's going to be other people with the same name, but there's only going to be usually one Isaac Davis of T. Gwyn Bach. That is, if he doesn't have like a nephew or an uncle or a father who also lives there, then there's going to be more than one. But like as I go down that like hierarchy of important information, like at the end, like if I've exhausted all of my searches, that's when I start going into like the witnesses on these marriage records. So like we'll go back to the original one. That's when I start researching like David Thomas of Bontvine and John Walters of Llanfair. Like in some cases, like that's gonna lead you to some kind of realization about how all of these people are important, or how they're all related to each other or connected to each other. And then in some rare cases, this is where the clergyman information ends up being important. Sometimes you'll be looking at something like a baptism register. So here's a baptism register for Newcastle Emlyn, 1841 to 1842. Um, so I like to look at, so who we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Letitia Grace here. But I like looking at this last comment because you can see by whom the ceremony was performed. In each case, John Price Jones, John Price Jones, John Price Jones, all the way down, except for this one record here for Letitia, who we're going to talk about. And that's always a hint for me because it's like, okay, so um, what's so special about Letitia that she has this completely different clergyman performing her baptism? Are they connected? Like, what's going on? Oh, Goodwin says, may I ask which part of Wales the Griffin, Griffith, and Griffiths mostly lived? You repeat that question at the end, and I'll grab my book and see if it says in my book. Because I have the Surnames of Wales by John and Sheila Rowlands. Probably the most important book about Welsh surnames to be published. So I'll grab my book because it's just over on my bookshelf, and I will let you know. So yeah, this record I find really cool. So it's the 1841 baptism of Letitia Grace Evans. She was baptized in Newcastle Emlyn in South Wales by Reverend John Perry Morgan. And he was the curate of Carnarvon. And Carnarvon is in North Wales, and it's about 109 miles or 175 kilometers away from Newcastle Emlyn. And we've already looked at the rest of the baptisms where Reverend John Price Jones was the person who performed the baptism. But John Perry Morgan only baptized Letitia after traveling 175 kilometers. And the reason for that is that he was actually a relative. And that's why he traveled all that distance to be there for this event. And I've seen this stuff a couple of times when people had close relatives who were clergymen. Sometimes they will travel down and do these important things like baptisms, marriages, and burials. And so it is worth it to look at those look at the people who performed it. And even in this case with Letitia, you've even got the day of her birth, which you don't normally get in baptism registers for the Church of England. So that's really cool. So yeah, just to kind of like reiterate, I just want to make it clear that the reason that you need to read the records and that you need to summarize the records is because that gives you the tools to continue researching. If you just stick the record in an AI and skip over that step, you're depriving yourself of those tools and you're depriving yourself of the practice of building expertise and getting better at research. The same goes if you're someone who only looks at the index but doesn't look at the original record. You're depriving yourself of building expertise and getting better at this research. And that sucks because I'm all about like more knowledge, the better. And I know that's one of the reasons that people use AI is that family history research takes a long time. But that's just the reality of doing good, thorough research. It takes time. And that's something that you start to understand better as you move on in your years of researching. You just kind of come to that realization that it just takes a long time and that's just how it is. And that it's also worth it because of the information that you learn, because of the family members that you find, because of the skills that you build. Like doing genealogy research is such an amazing skill building practice. Like I've learned so much, not only about research, but also about like organization and like filing systems and things like that. Yeah, it's just such a great activity. Um, and also like at the beginning of your research, like when you first start, it can feel like you can just do it all so quickly. And like you can in some cases, but then you end up making a mistake and then you're just researching someone else's tree and having to kind of like chop off that branch afterwards after doing all that work. It just doesn't feel very good. Or you'll end up hitting a brick wall, and suddenly it's not easy anymore, and then it takes longer and longer for you to find new ancestors. But if you do go in and read these original records, like you'll build those skills that it won't be as hard as it could be. Um, but yeah, I think that learning to really sit and read and process the records will help make those moments when the records do get more tricky, it'll make them a lot less tricky. And it'll make those brick walls a bit less formidable. And all it takes is actually reading what the records say. And that's kind of what I have for today. I do want to say thank you to my YouTube members, Wiggle Wiggle and Alan Griffith. Thank you for your support. And if any of you listening want to become a YouTube member and help support the channel, that would be amazing. But I know that not everyone can. So if you've enjoyed this video, if you have learned something from it, make sure to leave a like. You can also subscribe and you can leave a comment because all of that stuff lets YouTube know to actually push out my videos, to show them to more people. And that makes it a lot easier for me to keep going. So yeah, if you have any questions, if anyone here has any questions, write them in the chat. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go grab that book, and we'll see where the Griffiths, the Griffins, and the Griffiths come from in Wales. I'll be right back. I am back. Okay. So let me see. So The Surnames of Wales by John and Sheila Rowlands, amazing book. I read the whole thing except for one chapter because one chapter was just like, basically like a dictionary of all Welsh surnames, all surnames in Wales. Like they look at all of the Welsh surnames, meaning that mostly in like the early 1800s, they look at all these surnames. And so like they're not only focusing on ones that come just from the Welsh language like some other books do. There's another surname book. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's just like Welsh surnames. By like Morgan or something. It's like an earlier book, but he only looked at the surnames that came from the Welsh language, which is like not a lot of them. So like he didn't look at Jones, didn't look at Davis, which I am resentful for. Yeah, because those names derive from Hebrew, I think. David and John from the Bible, they're biblical names. Let me see, so 67, where's Griffith? 46, 102, it's probably on 102, yeah. So they don't have a map for the Griffith surname, but they do have an entry in like the dictionary section. They talk about some of the old princes that were named Griffith. It was a common forename in the 15th century pedigrees, so in the 1400s, averaging about 6% throughout Wales and rising to 9% in Meirionydd. But again, these pedigrees are the richest of the rich people. Oh, okay, I'll do Edwards too. I could do a stream just like, let's look through the book. I think some people would really enjoy that because when I make surname videos, everyone wants me to talk about their specific surname, and it's like I can't know that you're gonna watch this video. I don't know to talk about your specific surname, and I don't think people don't like that. But it's always nice that they comment, and always nice that they're interested, and it just gives me an opportunity to make more videos. Griffiths became a widespread patronymic surname. Okay, so 1813 to 1837, Griffith was found throughout Wales. Significant concentrations along the whole length of the Llŷn Peninsula, so in Carnarvonshire and in North Pembrokeshire. So yeah, North Wales. North Wales is where the Griffiths are from. Oh, you sent your tree to me. I have a very vague memory. I do get a lot of emails. So sorry for... Oh, I flipped straight to Edwards. Perfect. So yeah, North Wales. That's where most... the other thing that is really cool about this book, they actually have, and I was disappointed that they didn't put all of this data in the book, but you can, if they're still around, hopefully they're still around, John and Sheila Rowlands, if you contact them with the names, so like if you're someone in the States, and and you have like your ancestors, you know that one of the couples married in Wales, and you know both of their original surnames, you can send them that information, and they actually did a bunch of like statistical analysis that can pinpoint like the probability of where that couple actually came from. So I think it's like, I can't remember where in the book the examples were, but they had an example. It might have been something like a Davis. We'll say a Davis marries a Davis, and we only know that they married in Wales. Probability, according to like the probability, they're probably from mid Cardiganshire, just because of the frequency at which Davis is a surname in Cardiganshire. It's going to be most likely that they're from there. So they did all of these like statistical analysis to kind of like figure out where people would be from. It's really, really cool. And again, like you can buy this book. Again, it's The Surnames of Wales, John and Sheila Rowlands, and it's from 1996. It's really, really good. It's also on Google Books. There's a couple chapters that you're able to read on Google Books. So let's go to Edwards. Who was it that asked for Edwards? I think it was Wales. Anyway, I can't see who asked for Edwards. But Edwards, 1813 to 1837. It's a surname which is found in every area of Wales. But it's not like among the most common. Where it is most concentrated is on the border of Merionethshire and Denbighshire, where it is about 6% of the population. Oh, there's also Bedwards, like Ab Edwards turned into Bedwards, which there is some along the English border. But yeah. But other than that, I guess their conclusion is that it's just kind of like it appears all over the country, but only in that one place is there like kind of a concentration of it. Yeah, what Wales says about Davis, St. David, Dewi Sant, David, Davis. Yeah, I want to know why, because so many of my ancestors from Cardiganshire, like they had so many different surnames to choose from. Oh, it was Jules. You're welcome. I'm glad I could help. They had so many surnames to choose from, but so many of them chose Davis. Um, like my 8 times great grandfather Timothy Jacob, all of his children were Davises, and it's like, why? Why were you not Jacobs? Why were you not Timothys? My 7 times great grandfather David John Morgan. Like, I get why all the children became Davises based on his name David, but they could have also become Morgans. They could have become Joneses or something. But just like so frequently, it just they're choosing Davis over other options. I had another ancestor, William Thomas Harry. All of his children became Thomases, and it's like, but you could have become Williamses, you could have become Harrys, but no, they went with Thomas, and I don't. I mean, I know that it's related to the fashion of the times because names are all about fashion, like keeping up with what's popular, with what's gonna give you the kind of like prestige that you want. But yeah, I'd just love to know like the thinking of that. Tez Hug says, it always fascinates me that Jones is seen as a very popular Welsh name, if indeed it is, but there's no J in the Welsh alphabet. Oh, you're going to get me on my J rant. I think it was my second last video is actually about J in the Welsh alphabet, because since the 80s, J has been like accepted as a letter in the Welsh alphabet according to like the people who write the grammars and stuff, and also like the Genealogy Prifysgol Cymru. They also have accepted J, and it's really interesting reading after hearing people say that there's no J in the Welsh alphabet and just seeing like the arguments for why it should be included is really fascinating, because there are like colloquialisms and stuff that actually use the J word, or the J sound of J in Welsh. So like jowl, which is devil in parts of South Wales, I think. Skidje was the other example from the video and from that grammar that I found. Yeah, go check out that video, Tez. I think it's one of the ones that I'm most proud of. I think it turned out really well. But yeah, it's been an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm out of steam now. But that was a really good live stream, I think. I really enjoyed talking with everyone. Thank you so much for all of your comments.